see Alan's inbox.
No, it's okay. We're going live now. Welcome back to New Realities. This is our roundtable, our E.T. roundtable with our steady panelists, Henrietta Weekes, Steve Strieber. This week, we're missing David Metcalf, but we do have a special guest who's been on the show before, Caroline Cory. She's going to be at Contact in the Desert. She's also the director of Superhuman.
The Invisible Made Visible.
The Invisible Made Visible. So you were just talking about that for a second, Henrietta. What did you say?
Yeah, I would love to hear you talk about it again, Karen.
Well, what were your comments about her
and
film,
tell us
though?
about it. Because anybody who hasn't... Oh, no, I was just saying that I started watching it literally just the other night. I have to finish it. So, but I'm terrible. I fall asleep if I start late at night. But I loved what I saw so far. Yeah.
Well, I was just interviewing
Steve,
her about
it's
really about opening up the mind to these possibilities that all of us have as incredible human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And why did you actually make the movie? I'll ask her that.
Yeah, I mean, again, because since I was a kid, I would have all these experiences, and I
see Alan's inbox.
Oh, sorry. It's okay. Sorry.
Live now.
Wait, sorry. Oh, wait, sorry for that feedback. Go ahead, Caroline.
Yeah, so since I was a kid, I would have these experiences, and it got me on the idea that there's consciousness that is fundamental behind everything that we see. And so 20 years later, I developed methodologies for meditation, for consciousness expansion, for all kinds of stuff. And eventually, I mean, it's validation after validation after validation that this stuff is real. We're not making stuff up. And people heal from stuff. People can remote view. I could see things, behind the wall, things that would happen the next day. So finally, I realized we need to put this out there. And I didn't want to just put it out there, just kind of say, hey, this is what we all do. I wanted to bring some sort of scientific validation for it, just to kind of take it to the next step, because I'm not the first person who says the mind creates your consciousness creates your reality. I wanted to show how this was possible.
I have a question, because Steve is very scholared in mediumship and that whole kind of occult realm before it became New Age. It was sort of, how does what you're doing fit into like the history of some of the stuff, Steve? Because he taps in, he gets voices, he writes.
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about what you do?
Alan, it's funny you asked that, because that's what I was going to ask you, Caroline. I was going to ask, what do you consider your historical precursors? And, I try to go as far back as possible. A lot of it's literature, but there's things happening. So what do you consider your historical precursors? And maybe go back as far as you can think, because I'm always curious.
Yeah, since I was 5, when I was 5, I had those experiences. And so what would happen is I would just spontaneously see beings, and I would talk to them telepathically. I would see someone and I knew what they were thinking. I would see what was going to happen the next day. So it was a spontaneous thing that happened over and over and over as I was growing up. So eventually, first I thought, oh, everybody can do this. It's no big deal. It's like, there's nothing special about this. But later on, as I grew up, I realized, well, not everybody's doing this naturally. Why? And so that was what got me on the idea that everybody should be doing this. This is a natural process. And so that's the reason why I wanted to understand what my brain was doing in order to get there, what my consciousness was doing in order to get there. And so I developed specific methodologies to tap into whatever consciousness. If I want to channel this or tap into that, how do I know? How do I discern that I'm not making stuff up? How do I know I'm seeing the truth? And so that's why it took me a long time to develop these very specific methodologies, that I train many people to do, So that's how I got into this whole thing. And now making the films is to just bring more validation that, when you see something and it happens the next day, or you heal something and you see it, first in lab test, and you see it, before and after, then this is real. And so that's kind of how I got on this journey. But I could hear telepathically since I was 5.
Okay.
Can I have a quick question for you, Caroline? So it was 5 when you started experiencing these things?
Yeah.
And then did it accelerate as you got
No, it didn't accelerate.
older?
It was more.
It didn't?
No, it was more sporadic. So it's like I remember stuff around 5, and then a little bit later, and then like other stuff like around 8, and then another very big one at 10, and then like at 14. You know what I mean? It was more like, for all I know, it was the whole time. But these were the sporadic moments that kind of stuck with me, and whatever experience it was very, very clear. And
right.
so I remember the
And
details.
that
like,
continued.
Even to this day. Yeah.
And would you have very clear, your premonitions were very clear and very accurate?
Yeah. So exactly. So that's kind of, it started out, it was interesting because it was very accurate for a while, and then it started to be a little bit off. And then I realized that I was being trained. I was being forced to see what I did this time so that I don't do it again. Does that make sense? So it's like, so it was first accurate for a long time to tell me that I was onto something. And I got onto this research and those methodologies that I've, come up with. And then when it starts to go off, I had to tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak. Does that make sense? Until it was kind of the full mastery of what it was.
Well, I think that's the same with mediumship, isn't it, Steve? When
I was going to ask Steve too, exactly what's the, as you say, historical precursors, Steve, because you're the scholar.
Well, thanks. Well, one of the
I
things
want to know.
thinking today about, well, with mediumship and things like that, there's a term called inner certainty, where you kind of train yourself to understand that at that moment, the inner certainty is leading you down, let's say, the right trail, and your perception.
Yes.
One of the things I was thinking today, though, I was actually curious. I said to myself, how much of this that we're going for, this kind of consciousness expanding, is to make our thought more efficient, more efficient thought?
Yes. Yes.
Is that in the mix, Cal? Also,
Well,
Cal,
Caroline actually, I think, has a theory about the efficiency of thought and the connection to the grid. That there's been a scrambling of our thoughts that have made it very inefficient over the history of humanity, right?
And just to say, if our thought became more efficient, does that lead to things like telepathy?
That's a great point, Steve.
It
You're
is.
right. Coherence, right? So you want to talk about the efficiency and the coherence of the grid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, so the idea is the more you train your mind to behave a certain way, the more you have control over it. And then you can apply it to all sorts of things, and you start to discern when you're being interfered with and you're getting the wrong, so now it's so clear. Sometimes, I literally start having thoughts or feelings, and right away I know it's not me. I know exactly, I'm picking up there's somebody interfering or some entity interfering. There's, you know what I mean? That's what it helps with. And so the more accurate you are, the more you then also can apply it and create efficiently, like you're saying, everything in your life. So you know why you're not creating this, why you're stuck here, or what you
So
should
Caroline, the idea of interference, can you maybe go into that a little bit? Who is interfering, or what do you consider to be?
So because I can see the subtle energy, I can see the beings myself. So in the beginning, when I would work with someone, I would see like an entity there, so that was literally, sometimes they hide, but I could see, for example, the root cause of their problem. It was an entity that was kind of feeding information to them. So that's why you kind of recognize the signature of certain beings. It's not one being or one type of being. It's all kinds of things that could happen. Sometimes, it's your deceased grandmother, even though you had a good relationship with her, but, she's coming through to guide you with something, but you are misinterpreting the signals. So it's interference, even though it's benevolent, but it's still interfering with the information or the messages you're supposed to be picking up. So interference is in so many different, I've seen like entities that are super dark that are interfering with your thought, especially with mental illness. When we talk about schizophrenia, I literally can see the beings that are talking to them and giving them visions and stuff like that. So to all kinds of thought forms, or like I said, to beings, family members. You're not.
Let's let Henrietta pop in for a second. What do you have, Henrietta?
No, I'm just really curious. When you say that you can see these things, and everything looks, all the different beings or entities or whatever you are seeing, are you seeing them literally like you would see a character in a film? Is it that clear? Or is it something that you're like seeing with your inner eye?
It's very clear, but it looks kind of like, compared with you, like you're a material being. It would be a little bit like a hologram, if you will. It could, in terms of consistency, like in terms of,
right.
So it's that sort of like, you can see a little bit through, if you will. So but I can see the shape. And so what happens is that also, like sometimes, like let's say, I see your dad, but you didn't show me a picture of your dad.
Funny you should say that about her dad, right, Henrietta?
Well, I do see her dad.
You do see her dad?
Yeah. So,
I know.
Oh, wow.
So what I'm saying is, how do
I?
Oh
yes,
you didn't show me.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Because you didn't show me a picture of your dad. So how do I know it's your dad? So you train yourself to. So I am picking up your relation, like I'm picking up his signature through your consciousness. You recognize this being as your dad. So when I look at him, I say it's your dad, even though I never met him before. I don't even know what he looks like. And but it's so if I'm working with someone, I see all kinds of beings.
But, her father had just passed over last year, but she's very much in communication with him, aren't you, Henrietta?
Yes, particularly at the moment.
He's on the right side of you, she says. So does he have anything to tell her? Yes, I guess so. Does he have anything to say to her? Or
he's not finished working with you. So there's more, like he's saying, like there's more work to be done with him. He's guiding you on a lot of stuff, actually, and a lot of emotional things that you're processing. He's saying that he's also bringing that through. So for you to flush it out, like once and for all, with your mom.
Wow.
So that's what he's saying.
wow, you are good. I may
Definitely good. That couldn't be more on point. That could not be more on point. No, I mean but it can in the light of last week's happenings, you could not be more on point. So very good. I'm very
Wow.
impressed.
But
So do you
Steve,
consider what you're doing mediumship, or do
I
you
was going to
consider
say,
it?
is it mediumship?
So I
or
don't do
what is-
it's mediumship usually is when you channel an entity. And so first of all, I don't bring any entity through my being. I don't bring anybody who takes over my body.
No, mediumship, Caroline, is communicating. Is no
Well,
channel.
it can be.
I'm saying I don't do that part. I
Right.
don't do that kind. I can communicate with anybody, anybody who's alive or not alive or dead or angels or E.T.s or anybody.
Right.
And so the way it happens is, like I said, it depends. You have to ask me a specific question. Otherwise I can go
But
anywhere.
you didn't ask her about her father. He just.
No, I just saw. So what happens is yeah, of course, on Zoom I can see. So what happens is I can see, like I said, I see the being and I recognize the signature, and then I can establish the communication telepathically, and so that's how I relay the message.
Is that like a gift you have because you've been connecting to these other beings? I mean, everyone. I mean, Steve can do. I mean, Steve knows medium. He can do.
I mean, I teach this. I call it the merging process. I teach this in my classes. All my students can do this now. What happens is they're not as accurate, but that's what you train yourself to do. So it's a methodology, and then eventually, the more you do it, you become more and more and more accurate.
So I asked before about possibly precursors. So you say it's a methodology. What do you
The precursor is that I had spontaneous experiences myself. That
Okay.
was the precursor.
Okay, so you don't consider yourself any part of a tradition then? I'm just curious because
No, I never went to India. I didn't follow any guru. I didn't have
You
study
don't
with
need a tradition to do what she
No,
does.
no. I'm just curious though. I'm always curious if.
Yeah, no. It just all happened spontaneously, and I kind of figured out like as I went along.
Which is something I endorse because we've talked a lot in this series about narratives. So
Yeah.
you're creating a narrative of
Yes.
your own, which
Yes.
we sort of endorse here. We're kind of wondering about narratives that are perhaps too forced or who have been too
Yes.
manipulated by the media. So it's nice to hear that you believe that and I'm not saying it's not true, but that you believe that your narrative is kind of uninfluenced and it's kind of pure, which is I'm very
It is
curious about.
uninfluenced.
She knows it because she didn't have any training from any
Yeah, no.
And
tradition.
when you're
Yeah.
5, you don't know.
No, I really like that too.
You what,
Yeah.
Caroline? I mean, Henrietta, we lost. Say that again. Henrietta.
I know. Sorry.
Say
I'm
it
just
again.
really interested in that too. I'm here.
Oh, but say what you just said because we lost some of
I'm
that
really
sentence.
interested. Like I said, just like Steve, it's very interesting to hear from a person who has no, who doesn't think of themselves as part of a tradition or lineage. That's just interesting in itself.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, actually, Steve, with you and your experience with mediumship, could you speak to that a bit in terms of Caroline's obvious abilities?
Good question. Yes.
I work with Sue Barnes up in Lilydale, and I've always had experiences, but I'm always on the fence about the value of them.
Right.
Working with Alan, like you, Henrietta, Alan has really helped me come out with this stuff and be more comfortable with it. And working with Sue Barnes up in Lilydale, I'm just trying to develop mediumship along those lines. I've had, I get a lot of hits, and it's also remote viewing, Caroline. I'm sure you've been involved. And I've been working with
remote viewing. Yes.
Masahiro Kahata, who's a very good friend of mine, has been doing brainwave research for 30, 40 years. I've been working with him for 30 years. He has the IBVA, the brainwave. Are you familiar with that one, Caroline?
No.
He's one of the granddads of EEG and brainwaves. psychic lab. So I've been working with him. But as far
Really?
as yeah, oh yeah, I've been working with Masahiro for 30 years actually.
What's his name again, Steve? Could you just?
Masahiro Kahata.
Does he do brainwaves on remote viewers to see what
Yeah,
happens?
of course. Sure, I do remote viewing with Masahiro all the time, and
But
it's
what
actually
is
really
the
funny. Alan,
brainwave? Go ahead.
actually, I invited him to the Zoom room today. So
Oh,
Masahiro, if
good.
you're listening, come in. I gave him the link. I
Oh,
didn't know.
good. Well, he's
It'd be
not here
great to
yet,
have him here.
but I'd love to
It would be
talk
good
to him because
yeah.
I'm wondering what the brainwave of a remote viewing moment is when they get that flash. Have you done that?
You technically should be in the gamma range.
Gamma
Right.
ray.
You have the theta
Well-
and the gamma at the same time. Technically.
Alan mentioned coherence before. He used the
Yeah.
word coherence, which I
Yes.
was like, that's very important to Masahiro and his brainwave cosmology, that when there's coherence, right, left brain coherence,
Yes.
and that, he's very pleased to see people with high coherence.
Well, the higher the coherence, maybe the more aligned you are, the more open you're getting, the more psychic you are, or whatever, intuitive. I mean,
Well, Caroline, I think it would be interesting for you to talk about your brainwave experience in a couple minutes, a couple seconds. I just want to say that I view the brainwave phenomena not as a gamma or alpha or hyper gamma. I see it as a manifold series of vibrations all happening at once. Just some of them become more prominent at certain moments, maybe where we put our attention, and I'll use
Yeah,
an old, go ahead. Energy
ahead.
flows where attention goes, right? So go ahead,
Right.
Caroline, talk about brainwaves, if you don't mind.
I think what happens is that it's not so much, like you're saying, one brainwave version, but what happens is that as the gamma and the theta, kind of work together, what happens is they create a pattern. So, and harmonics. So it's the patterns and the harmonics that put you in that state of consciousness, or vice versa. When you are in that state of elevated consciousness, you are vibrating and you are creating those harmonics in your brain. So, but in terms of apps or whatever technologies out there, usually just people measure the individual brainwaves. But there's one, what's his name? Dan Winter.
Yeah, Dan Winter,
Yeah,
love him.
he created an app where you actually see patterns. And what happens is that I used another one when I did my work. I could see that all the waves were perfectly coherent when I was in that state of consciousness. Whereas with Dan Winter's thing, like when you are in that higher state of consciousness, the patterns were very interesting as well. So also coherent. So I think this is more what I believe is happening. You create coherence. And
Right, Caroline, I'm going to just let me go. I've
Yeah.
mentioned this before on this panel. There's a man called Lamont Young. He's a composer, and he has a place called the Dream House downtown Manhattan. It's been there 30 years. It has 4 speakers in each corner, and it has 16 synthesizers of varying sine wave lengths going out. While you stand in the room, it creates interference patterns within the room. As you walk through the room, the sound will go, and then all of a sudden you just go like that. And because you've shifted in this field of harmonics, the sound will go beep, 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 beep. And if you go back, it goes. So I'm realizing that that's like a training tool to understand that we can move through this mesh or this multiple fabric, hyper fabric of vibrations and frequencies, and learn to attune ourselves. Again, the inner certainty, to find that spot where the interference patterns happen, and we tune ourselves to that inner certainty and learn how to develop these enhanced perceptions.
Well, I was just thinking that the coherence is only at one level, right? There must be levels and levels of coherence until you are the all-wise knowing intelligence where
Wheels
everything
within
just finds out.
wheels within wheels, always.
Right. Do you
wheels
get
within
that for yourself, Caroline? Were you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
What-
layers and layers and layers.
So you're at one level because you can look at Henrietta and see her father. That's one level of coherence, right? That is a coherent alignment. And then,
But that's a pretty advanced level of coherence, because if I can do this, then I can do the same of somebody sitting on the moon. Then I'm already, what I'm saying is I'm tapping into the universal map. So when you talk about level, it's not so much, like how far you can go, whatever. It's more the accuracy. It's almost like a zoom, like you can see fuzzy and then less fuzzy and less fuzzy and less fuzzy. So it's more like that.
I agree with that 100%, Cal, because
what
this
I mean?
idea of dimensions 1, 2, 3, and
No,
4 is
I don't
wrong.
agree with
There
that.
are no, it's all
No.
a mesh. It's all
Yeah.
an interwoven fabric of reality. And
It's all a mesh. Yes.
if we enhance our perceptions, we begin to see the deepness of it
Yeah.
and how deep it
Right.
goes, as opposed to saying that this is distinct from everything else. These aren't distinct things. They're all interwoven very tightly. And the idea about interference patterns is a very good one, where this is perhaps where these things intersect more strongly or in different ways. Can you speak about the variety of entities you've encountered?
Yes, I was curious too about,
Yeah. So I mean,
the difference
I
between
talk about them in my
ones you've
books
seen.
and in my movies. People should watch Among Us on Prime, Amazon Prime. I talk a lot about them in that movie, Among Us. But also in my books, it's like a whole types of beings, from evolutionary, meaning material type beings, all the way to universal type beings that never materialize. I mean, it's like a whole major discussion that I get into. So
well, that's good. So there's levels and levels of coherency. Like you're at one level, and then somebody else will be at another. Well, we just have some special guests that have arrived
I'm
today.
gonna let them take over.
All right,
See you
let them
later.
Oh, wait, I just
Caroline,
wanted to
thank you.
ask
Oh, wait,
Caroline
go
one
ahead,
more
go
question.
ahead, Henrietta.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to ask you about your film, your recent film, Superhuman. Because for those watching who haven't seen it,
Yeah,
it would
they
be
should
lovely.
watch- It's Superhuman, the invisible made visible, and it's on
Mhm.
Amazon Prime. Same with the movie Among Us is on Amazon Prime. They can also go to
Among Us.
superhumanfilm.com, and then they can see all the information there as well.
I've seen it.
Okay.
It's a great film, really. Very well done. So congratulations. Very
Yeah,
Thank you,
I'm
Caroline.
going to watch it this evening.
We just have a few new guests showing up, and we're just gonna change the
Oh, good.
background for this. And I'm joined here with Desiree Hurtak, and I could shut up the whole background there, because you know what? As you came in, we were talking about different beings on different levels, JJ, and of course, you've had the classic experience of meeting beings on higher and higher levels. Do you want to talk about your experience then?
Well, first of all, let me welcome all of you watching this interview. Desiree and I are both social scientists. We work worldwide with leading investigators. I had a personal experience in '73 of seeing a luminous being that would be called ultra-terrestrial, not extracelestial, but ultra-terrestrial, a being that was in an energized form. And that changed my life and reality as a scientist. And so Desiree and I have documented case studies throughout the world with social scientists, with shamans, with investigators, formerly with the government. And we're going to be producing a book that will show some 82 different categories of beings that are in many ways similar to the human race, but slightly different.
But right now, of course, we had done one chapter in Alan's book called Extraterrestrial, Multidimensional, Non-Local Reality. So, and it talks about the fact of, in a certain sense, how they're communicating with us and how they're getting here and how they operate. And that's just, of course, one chapter in a great book that I know many of you hopefully have already read. So,
So this is going to, I would say, revolutionize a biological textbook of what we consider human evolution / meta evolution. This is the terminology that Dr. Hynek used, a colleague of mine many years ago, who started really the first significant breakdown of the different categories of ET intelligence. So we're very thrilled to be here with Caroline and with Alan, the author of this very special book.
Well, it's interesting. We're just talking about levels of coherence with Caroline, and when you had these beings come to you, you created a sound vibration that was a high level of coherence.
Correct. In other words, if you look at all of the traditional societies that claim a living cosmology or a living dynamic of life in the universe, they will invariably go to what is called the music of the spheres. This is a Greek term Pythagoras used and others. There's a vibratory sound wave that is connected with these higher dimensional experiences. And as a musician, composer, I had the opportunity in my way to hear these sounds, to bring them down into symphonic levels of sound production. And that's,
and so the idea is that sound is really everything. It's connected with our bodies, but we also think it's connected with the universe. When the astronauts, one of the ones, I forget exactly which one, went around the backside of the moon, they reported this strong sound. It wasn't just one of them who heard it. It was actually all the astronauts on board our spaceship that went around that heard it. So, people used to think, oh, there's no sound in space. But the more and more people analyze the frequencies, the vibrations, maybe you have to take the sound frequency to an audible range in some cases, but all planets, everything has the sound vibration. And chances are a lot of people have seen extraterrestrials. And even though they say they're silent, some of them actually have heard certain types of beaming kind of frequencies or something unusual.
well, the Sanskrit tradition.
Well, I'm going to jump in because if we're talking about sound and cosmology, go ahead, JJ.
No.
I just wanted to say before we begin that having studied the Sanskrit traditions, which is the oldest unbroken tradition of what we will call higher evolutionary information, clearly the Om vibration is the beginning of a metaphor / musical experience of what we must feel within ourselves if we are to elevate consciousness to a level of working with the wider variety of life in the cosmos.
So when we talk about sound and composition and cosmologies, I got to go to Stockhausen, right? And his work with the Urantia, and his later work with the Urantia stuff, and just his general cosmology. What do you think, JJ, of somebody like Stockhausen? I was very, very good friends and did a lot of work with Marianne Amiche. If you're familiar with her, she studied with Stockhausen, and she was very tight with John Cage.
Well,
but Stockhausen, go ahead.
No, I'd like to hear a little bit. Yeah, say what your interpretation is first, so that we can.
Well, I just wondered, so the idea of ultrasound perhaps comes into this. The sounds off the spectrum of audibility. The idea that there are sounds out there that we do not hear, but somehow can affect us. The idea that perhaps we have vestigial or future organs that allow us to perceive these new vibrations that are not yet accepted as perceptible, even though they probably are. Again, I mentioned to Alan this thought I had the other day: enhanced perceptions equal other dimensions. So I just want to hear you talk about composers, maybe perhaps Stockhausen being one of them, Celsi, Scriabin, and those people, and vibrations. Thanks, JJ.
Yes, I like what you're saying. As you may or may not know, I was on the music faculty with Ravi Shankar and other gifted musicians.
Andre Previn.
And they were interested in the interface with Stockhausen and John Cage. And it was this back in the 70s. And one celebrated artist slash scientist, Namjoon Paik, whose life story is now an exhibit in San Francisco. 200 pieces of art show futuristic science and the construct of musical sound, and the use of sacred geometry stands out because what we did with Morton Sabatnik, the father of the first electronic symphony, was to create a studio environment where our students could sit and look at a video synthesizer, and through the sounds and the feedback coming, could recreate the images on the screen of the video system, showing that biofeedback can be a very important tool if it is a process of looping music and creating a higher synthesis of what I would call a higher consciousness.
And yeah, we've also worked with the Great Pyramid and the King's Chamber.
And we noticed that that music was definitely scored to go off the range of the human ear in the subtonic.
It went into sub undertones,
Right.
and even enhancing what we consider the alpha frequencies of the brain, which puts you in a state of meditation. So
we don't have the picture here to show you, but you can go to our website, keysofenoch.org, and order what was called the pyramidal capstone.
well, actually, opening of the Great Pyramid.
Opening
as
of the
well.
Great Pyramid, and you actually can see the actual picture of golden light
Or living capstone is the one you actually can see.
inside the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid. We were able to reach a musical frequency without any instruments, just using higher vocalizations of mantras. And suddenly we hit a vibration that cascaded down to the whole Grand Gallery and stayed there a few seconds, which was captured on film, showing that the pyramids were set up also as musical trigger devices.
I mean, it is amazing that our brain is really based on frequencies, and they say that all the frequencies exist in the brain. I mean, all the ones that we would have from like theta to delta and things like that, but that sometimes one becomes more predominant than the other, and especially the alpha frequency has been seen in many of the states of meditation that the yogis have been tested with.
So the next question is, how does this relate to the extraterrestrial story
Yes,
that
that's a
Alan
good
is speaking
question.
about? And it is clear that several of the spacecraft have certain sound structures, and they can identify us through our positive thinking, but also the use of musical rhythms, like the indigenous people of the American Southwest. They make certain sounds, usually in the F sharp range, and there's corresponding light phenomena that appears. Again, we cannot say there's a definite musical code versus extraterrestrial happenings, but definitely sound structure is part of this. You saw in Steven Spielberg's film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, at the end of the story with Dr. Hynek.
Well, let Steve and Henrietta ask a question. Steve's always
No,
asking.
he was.
Okay.
Well, I would ask, I just, when you were talking about the chamber, I think about resonant frequency, right? And
Right.
when you say it was cascading out, I think about the resonant frequency of a space and how that can build up these resonances into rather uncomfortable. I was talking to somebody who's making a film on Pauline Oliveros, and if you're familiar with Pauline, and she did a thing in Mills where she had one oscillator but tuned it to the resonant frequency of the room, and everybody ran out of the room because this goes back to Tesla, right? Tesla's
Right.
resonant frequencies.
Now,
Where
are
he
you speaking of Mills College in
Yeah.
California?
yeah.
So
Mills.
I knew Robert Brown, who was on the faculty there with the gamelan with the Indonesian
Right.
assembly.
So,
And,
but why F sharp? Why F sharp? You mentioned F
F sharp was
Why-
considered to be a variation of F, which was considered by the ancients the basic sound of Mother Earth. So F sharp was the peaking of this sound within pyramidal structures, both in Mexico and in Egypt. We did a systematic study over 30 years with leading musicologists, sound engineers, having official permission to bring in very sensitive equipment inside the interior of the pyramidal chambers.
Right.
This actually we filmed, and so it will someday be available when certain individuals pass from the scene, because this is part of the World Heritage. There was the sound structures of Egypt And Mexico, and for that matter, even China and Japan, do not belong to those countries, but to the human race, showing that these sacred pyramids and temples were ways of elevating our consciousness for what we
Right.
believe to be extraterrestrial / extra celestial
Right.
experiences.
So archaeoacoustics has been
Correct.
very
We're
on
one of
the,
the few that knows the story.
Well, they
And-
created it. They were one of the early innovators of archaeoacoustic.
right. And what's his name? Paul Devereaux, right? Paul Devereaux, very
Right.
important. But have you been to Malta then? I haven't been to Malta, but have you been to
actually,
Malta?
People tell us to go to Malta. They
Malta-
Several of our
is-
friends have been underground in
In
the
the
chambers,
chambers, yeah.
and they said that the sound effects are
I-
tremendous.
Yeah, Malta is supposedly the hypnogeum or whatever it is.
Uh,
I also just want to say when Marianne Amiche, one of her last pieces was they allowed her to go down into the tunnel beneath the pyramid in Mexico City, way down where they measure the muons, because
Yeah.
the muons, and she went down there, and I'll tell a little story. She went down there and Marianne was like a bruja, and she went down with a cake pan and scraped the floor down there while these scientists were sitting around with her. And they're like, what the hell is she doing? And she recorded that, went back, processed it, and made a record called Tio that actually won the Golden Nika at Ars Electronica. So but that brings me to this underground kind of idea. And I just want to ask about the Schumann the Schumann frequency, the Schumann resonance, and what you think of that.
Yeah, well, Alan did ask that in a public conference.
I asked Beverly Rubik
Yeah.
that, who's a great energy scientist, and what did she
And the
say?
sound frequencies actually do work on harmonics. So, sometimes the 7.8, so to speak, Schumann resonance does get up into the, 14, 15 hertz range. But everyone in this is a conference of a lot of the electromagnetic healing techniques, all felt that the Schumann resonance was still with us on this planet. It's not to say it doesn't shift to other frequency vibrations from time to time, but the 7.8 is still present. And, Luc Montagnier, who was the Nobel Prize for HIV, he did some interesting things with sound, or the frequencies of the Schumann between 7 and 8 hertz is where he was looking. And he was able to encode DNA into water. That means you don't have the structure of the DNA, but you encode the frequencies of it into water. And then he could use like a PCR and pull it back into the actual structure because it was encoded in water. So I think the 7 to 8 hertz, 7.8 hertz frequency is very important for our life and our system here. And it has to do with the whole resonance of the planet. And
It shows that there's a vibratory field connected with the DNA. I want to ask you before I forget what the name of the album that won the awards in Mexico.
Tio, uncle.
Tio, T-E-O. It was,
His
yeah.
uncle in Spanish.
Marianne Amiche. Are you familiar with Marianne's work, JJ and Desiree?
Not really. That's why I'm really enthusiastic about what you've just said.
Yeah,
And
no,
I'll check
Marianne
it
was a
out.
very good friend of mine and really amazing stuff, and I can't recommend it. The only thing is she never wanted to record. It was all mostly live. She would set up installations.
Yeah.
And but when you go, we'll talk, just going back
Okay.
to Ravi Shankar, and let's talk Pandit
Wait, before you
Mack.
do that, Steve, I wanted to see if Henrietta has something to jump in
Sorry,
on.
Henry.
Go ahead.
No, don't worry. This is actually, a real learning for me.
All right. Go ahead, Steve.
Um,
Ask that question.
I'm
then.
just sort of soaking up the information.
Yeah, well,
I haven't really
well, so
thought of this a lot, but one thing, I was
You're breaking up quite a
yeah,
bit.
you're breaking up a
unfortunately.
bunch, Henrietta. Like really
Yeah.
bad.
I know. So you go ahead, Steve. I can
Okay,
come
I'll
back
ask. I
later.
think I know it.
I do
One of the
have
things
something
that-
else.
One of the things on this panel that we've been talking about over the months that we've been doing it, and it's been a very interesting experience with Henrietta and Dave Metcalf and our guests, is the idea of text and and language and text. And knowing, I'll just say, JJ, were you trained as a cantor by any chance?
Interesting question. My gifts were inherited, I guess, just by my genetics of having a high disposition towards studying music of all traditions, which I've done as an ethnomusicologist, so to speak. but also as a composer, having had my music performed by the Berlin Symphonic Orchestra on the use of mantric sounds. And going back to your early question, Ravi Shankar, who I knew as a colleague on the music faculty, he would tell me how he could leave his body under certain intense states of playing the sitar and have his consciousness projected into the audience, where he could look at his physical body from the standpoint of being in the audience.
Wow.
And realize there's a whole vibratory dimension that opens under certain conditions where you can physically leave your physical body and go into your energy body, transport, experience a higher relationship with the divine and the human, and then come back into your physical body. He said certain musical instruments, particularly the sitar, has a way of elevating us into our higher body. We would call this in psychology the higher self or the overself. So there's the music of the higher mind. There's the music of the spiritual frontier. There's the music of the planets that the Greek philosophers spoke of. They're all interconnected.
And we think it'll actually also be electromedicine, which is like a frequency vibration that actually can be used to help heal the body.
And are overtones related to the oversoul when you hear these like harmonics?
Well, we've heard, again, it's not the overtones as much in the Great Pyramid as the undertones.
The undertones.
So, but it's the harmonics. I think that's what you're really talking about.
Yeah.
And you can compare the undertones, the sounds made by whales and dolphins.
And it gets beyond what you can hear. We can't
Right.
hear that when it goes down.
So
into
Carl
the-
Sagan said, Carl Sagan said before he died, if he could arrange for space cities to have aquariums in the outer peripheral side of the cities in space, and then dolphins inside these celestial aquariums, because the dolphin or the whale would be able to pick up sounds over a wider range than the human.
And I was also just going to say, you talked about text. Well, it's interesting that some people have actually now taken the sonar of dolphins and be able to translate them into images. So sound frequencies can be images, just like semantics from Hans Jenny can be geometries from sound frequencies. So, we're starting to understand that.
But we do have to wrap it up because we're just here on our little road trip.
So this, I find, since your next book, Ellen, is going to be on art and the E.T. experience, you might have a part of a chapter on music.
Well, yes, music's important.
Definitely.
But
I found this fascinating. Just this whole
Yes,
when
please,
when JJ said this vibratory connection to DNA, and then Desiree, the possibilities or potentials of that for greater healing. And then somebody, I think maybe Steve, said the vestigial or future organs to perceive new vibrations that maybe are developing. I mean, it's all very exciting stuff. And obviously your work has been all about this for 30 or 40 years, but thank you for sharing it with us now, because people can understand it a lot more,
And I do think it's the future of medicine. And I think
Right.
it's also the way the extraterrestrials use frequencies and lights.
Right.
So
Agreed.
we do have
That's
to
definitely makes sense.
thank you everyone for joining us
Well,
today.
thanks, JJ. Thanks, Desiree. Always nice
Yes,
to
thank you so
Alan.
much.
Have a good
Next
road
week,
trip.
Always
maybe
so much fantastic
can we get-
information.
Thanks,
Can
Henrietta.
we get Tom Campbell, the
Thanks, Steve.
physicist, next week?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's try and
work
get
on
Tom.
that. The 25th, is it the 23rd, I think, right. Okay, great. Thank you. The
Hey,
Hurtak-
everybody,
you,
be
JJ.
careful. Have a good trip.
Thanks,
Okay.
Thank
Steve.
you.
I'm jealous.
Look for us in Joshua Tree. You can email me at newrealities@earthlink.net on Joshua Tree on the 17th, Rama Yoga on the 18th in Venice. On the 20th, we'll be in Ojai at the Love Cafe. And then you can email me for all directions and other. This is my book tour. This is my new
LA book tour.
my making
How
contact book
exciting.
tour. So
And JJ,
thank you.
Krippner's going to come visit you.
Oh
in
yeah,
Sebastopol.
Stanley Krippner's
He's an old
coming.
friend. We've known him.
Yeah,
for
I know. So he's looking forward to
25 years.
seeing you guys.
Stanley was going to be the best man at their wedding. You know
Wow.
We've known him for years.
Wow.
that's right.
Oh, wow.
See you later.
How long
Thanks,
have you been
everybody.
married?
Hello.
I don't say that.
Well, they've been together since 73. No, 73 when they had this contact experience.
Yeah.
Together,
Steve
wow, that's
Feeling.
amazing. I love that. That's, you know, that's a good time.
Thank you, Henrietta. I'll
Thank
talk to you
you.
soon.
Yes.
Steve,
Take it
always
easy, everybody.
good. Thank you. Thank everyone online for watching today. Another ET Roundtable and often resonance frequencies and vibrations today.
Yes, very
Thanks.
good.
I'll
Okay,
talk
bye,
to
thank you.
soon. I'll talk to you this week, Henry.